Hi there, I'm Watchin, founder and CEO of I Choose the Ladder, and I want to welcome you to the C-Suite Cheat Code, a show where we pull the curtain back on the unwritten rules of corporate America, and we give out the cheat codes to reconstructing the corporate ladder. The first item on our meeting agenda, employee motivation during the Great Resignation. Then we head on over to Facebook for a conversation with the global head of vertical solutions marketing, Lisette Williams, about navigating job changes. And before we end our meeting, we will head on over to the hot seat where I will answer your questions. Today, we'll be talking about getting your foot in the door of an organization and taking a chance on potential candidates. Clearly, we have a lot to talk about, so let's get to it. So let's all acknowledge that when people quit, it does have an impact on the nature, the feel of an organization, of a team. And sometimes that feel is better, right? If you lose an employee who maybe was not a positive contributor to the mood of the team, then that feels a little bit differently. But in the Great Resignation, we know that there are tons of people who have decided to leave the workplace for whatever reason it may be. And we have to admit that it does have an impact on the people who remain within the organization. Research has also shown that when one person leaves, it does increase the likelihood for others to follow suit. And so thinking about and focusing on the morale of the people who are remaining within your organization when there are people who have left, and if they are key people who have left or really highly visible people who were champions of employees, who were highly respected within the organization, you need to be even more intentional about focusing on how you can increase morale with the people who remain in the organization. And so a couple of tips on things that you can do to increase morale per this article that I read, and also things that I've seen work within the companies and the corporations that we work with. So the first is you want to create a culture where feedback is the norm and not the exception. You want to create a culture where you are consistently talking with each other, whether you're in leadership or you're an individual contributor, and you are getting a pulse or feeling the pulse of where you are as an organization, how your employees are feeling, what your employees are thinking, and maybe opportunities for growth that you may have as an organization. You want to make sure, though, that that feedback is not one-sided and that employees feel equally as empowered to give feedbacks to their managers as managers feel empowered to give feedback to the people who work for them. If they feel like there's a safe space to openly share thoughts, concerns, and areas of growth that you may have, you will definitely have a way to get in front of any challenges that you may have. Secondly, hire great people, but then let them do their jobs. Micromanaging or hiring someone and then underutilizing them makes them start to question their own abilities. They start to question themselves. And then as people leave, they may start to think that they're not a great fit for the organization. And then they also start pursuing other opportunities. And so if you've done your part as a leader and you've hired really talented, really competent, really capable people, it is your job to give them the resources that they need and then get out of the way and give them a level of autonomy over their work. This is not to say don't check in at all or just leave them on their own, but it is a balance between being a resource and supporting someone and then also hiring somebody and trying to do their jobs for them. Hire great people, give them resources, and then leave them alone to do their jobs. The third thing is to create opportunities where you can connect. We know that people work better with and feel more connected to organizations when there is a personal connection to the people that they work with. People work harder for people that they know, they like, and they trust. And so create opportunities that are maybe outside of the norm for your team to connect and for you to connect with them. One of the things I can think about, I despise employee happy hours. I don't drink a ton. I don't want to be around my coworkers when they're drunk, right? When I was still in corporate, because I feel like it could create uncomfortable situations. And so I would be one of the employees who would typically avoid those, right? I didn't want to put myself in an uncomfortable position. But there are other ways that you can connect. And as the leader of this team, you want to make sure that you're checking in with your employees to see what are some things that they're interested in, how you can create experiences around those, as opposed to defaulting to what may be easy or what may be what you've always done because you have different personalities within your organization. And then I would say the last thing is address the elephant in the room. Their colleagues have left. You feel away, you feel the loss. you feel the impact of the missing people, the missing headcount. So talk about it. Be very transparent about what it is that you're doing, what the loss means for the team, and then welcome or create or open the floor where people can have dialogue around how they feel about that. And then you come up with a plan to move forward. But don't act like it's not happening. Don't act like people aren't leaving. Don't act like their workload isn't increasing because people are leaving. But make sure that you explain to them that you are committed, because you should be committed if you're trying to get people to stay within the organization, and like talk through what a plan forward could look like, and also express to them that you appreciate them staying and them being there, and that you value them and their contributions. Next up, we head to my favorite place in the world, the internet. And in today's Found Around the Web, there is a meme that literally connects with me on a spiritual level. It says, when you uploaded your resume, but the job application still makes you retype out your entire work experience. Why do we still do that? Like, why are we so evolved that we can go into outer space, but we don't have processes streamlined enough so that you can enter information one time and be super efficient and then move on with the rest of the process? So if you are listening, whoever you are, like your specific you, who determines the digital job application process, please, we are begging you, help us. Don't let us upload our resume and then have to re-enter the information. Let's just be one and done. Can we do that? Can we promise to do that? One and done. No more retyping work experience if you're asking for a resume. In today's cheat code, we head on over to Facebook to speak with Lisette Williams about getting comfortable with changing jobs. I had the pleasure of meeting Lisette from afar. I saw her speak on a panel, maybe 5 or so years prior to having this conversation. If you want to see the full conversation, head on over to Spotify or iTunes, and she is episode number 70 of the I Choose a Ladder podcast. But in this part of the conversation, we talk about how you navigate job changes. We've all started to re-examine if we are in the jobs that we want and doing the kinds of work that we want to do. And so if you are that person, make sure you grab your I Choose a Ladder notebook, a pen, and your favorite beverage, and get ready to get these cheat codes from Lisette about changing jobs. Lisette, welcome to the podcast. I remember my first time meeting you, you were sitting on a panel at Kellogg, and I was like, who is this Black girl magic? And how do I get her in my life? So to finally, I feel like it's like 5 years ago at this point, to finally have you on the podcast is a dream come true.
Amazing. I'm excited to be here, and I'm so glad we're having this conversation.
So you have a massive job, right? So you currently are the global head of vertical solutions at solutions marketing at Facebook. You've worked at, PepsiCo, McDonald's, Kimberly-Clark. And so when people hear that, they probably get really intimidated, and they're like, dang, man, we can't do stuff like that. So for people who don't understand what you do and are instantly intimidated, can you put it in layman's term? What do you do for a living?
Well, first, I just want to clarify that I'm just like a regular schmegular girl from the Bronx. So no need to be intimidated at all. I really am. But I oversee a global team, and each of the people within my organization are responsible for a specific industry. So I have somebody over auto, somebody over government, somebody over e-commerce, 7 different industries across the board. And we basically oversee the way Facebook is going to go to market with our technology in those industries. So the way we would approach clients who are within those specific industries, or the way we show up at a major industry event within those particular industries, we're literally crafting the story and building the narrative around that. So
and so right now you're at a company that everyone knows, and you don't really have to say much, but think back to your very first job in corporate. How did you get that job? Did you always know? You said you're a regular smuggler girl from the Bronx. So did you always know that you would be in corporate, or how did you figure that stuff out?
Girl, no. I'm the first person in my family to go to college. The second person to graduate from high school. My mom was a bookkeeper at an office downtown, but a small office. So I didn't know anything about corporate. I was blessed enough to go to some great schools, and I found out about an internship program called Inroads. the Inroads internship program, which targets minority students for business careers. And honestly, it was out of necessity. I went to Columbia University in New York for my undergraduate. Majority of it was paid for with scholarships, but I did have to like support myself. And I literally was like, well, I need to get a good job. So what is a good job? I wasn't an engineer. So I was like, I'm going to go in. So I started Inroads when I was 17. My first internship out of the 12th grade was at Business Week magazine. And it was the very first time I had ever worked. It was my first job, period. Forget about a corporate environment. It was my first job, was showing up to Business Week magazine as a 17-year-old girl, going like traveling on the train downtown from the Bronx every day in the summer.
Can you think back, like, I know it was a while ago, but like that first day at work, like that first day at the internship, like how did you feel?
I was so nervous. And it's important to understand the community I was raised in. I grew up in an inner city community, predominantly Black and Latino. The first time I spoke to a white person my own age, I was in the 9th grade when I went away to boarding school. So I was still learning about how to engage with people that didn't look like me, which sounds crazy, but that's how those communities are. And so now, of course, my school, I went to a boarding school outside of Boston. It was predominantly white. So it was like an immersion in a very different cultural experience. But now the professional environment was actually quite different, because I was like, I don't know what to talk to people about. Like if I go to lunch or coffee with somebody, like I'm so nervous about saying the wrong thing. And I just had like so many, I was insecure in a lot of ways. I mean, there was a lot of things with my family background. I didn't have like expensive clothes or money to buy expensive work clothes. So I waited for my check and I went to the $10 store downtown and bought like skirts and tops, because that's what I had. And so I was trying to do the best that I could with the resources I had, but I still was living between two socioeconomic worlds in a lot of ways. And I think that complicated how I would find a common ground between my coworkers and I.
I mentioned at the beginning of the podcast some of the companies that you've had the opportunity to work for, who've had the opportunity of having your brilliance inside their walls. But for you, how do you know when it's time for you to move on, right? Like I know like for someone who's first gen, typically when you get a good job, and you tell your parents that you're about to leave that good job, there's like, what do you mean you're leaving X, Y, and Z? Like, that's a good job, girl. You better stay there for the rest of your life. Especially when it's like, you're making more money than your parents ever dreamed a human can make, and you are highly visible, and they get to see their daughter on TV, and you're doing all these cool things, and you're like, yeah, actually, I'm leaving, right? Like, how do you reconcile that? Because there are first gen people who listen and who have that struggle.
Yes.
But for you personally, how do you know when it's time to move on to the next opportunity?
That's such a great question. It is so, so true. I'll give you a story. So I was in strategy consulting before I went to business school, and I got a job at IBM. So old school, right? Like my family is like, oh, our daughter works at IBM. Like, you about to die here, like get all the pensions, like that's it. You don't ever need to work anywhere else. It's IBM, right? Like this is what, that's what people aspire to. And I decided, I thought I was going to be a strategy consultant my whole life and make partner. And I was there and I was like, this isn't it for me. Like, I want to see the culmination of my work. I want to see kind of the end-to-end experience. I'm tired of traveling. And it's time for me to go. The other thing was this has happened in other roles where I've hit a place where I didn't feel like I was learning anymore. And so I think I'm like just a continual student, a student of the business, a student of our consumers, a student of marketing. And so I think that's the question I have to ask myself when I get to a certain point. Like, am I still learning? Am I still growing? How much runway do I have in this experience? And that'll be an indicator for me of when it's time to move on. So I went back to apply to business school. I decided to go to Northwestern to get my MBA. And I went back to tell my family that I was doing the full-time program and leaving my job at IBM. They were like, what? With no job, because I didn't work in business school. I went full-time with no job. They thought I was like insane. And I was like, I promise you, like, this is going to work out. Like it was just such a foreign thing. So they've learned to just let me do my,
do you think?
It's just funny since you brought that up.
Well, yeah, because I remember when I had to tell my parents that I was leaving Yahoo, and like it was a company that they knew that they could brag to their friends about, and they're like, "You're doing what?" Like, no, that's a good job. I'm like, oh my god, like I'm gonna be fine. It's fine. Like it's Yahoo. Like it is totally fine. So for someone who has like worked for big named companies, right? A lot of times the name and the brand recognition like swallows us up, and now we become Lisette at Facebook, Lisette at McDonald's. How have you not let that become your story, right? Because like you're just Lisette, like everybody knows who you are, like outside of like they're like, oh, she's a dope marketer. Like it's not like you have not become like your brand identity has not become the companies that you work for. So is that intentional, or like how do you think through that?
Yeah, it's very intentional. And I think it's really important, particularly as diverse professionals, that we maintain our authentic voice, no matter where we are. And so I've been very intentional about maintaining my authenticity despite wherever I am. So you can look at my body of work, whatever the name is on the business card, and I was repping the company hard. But across my body of work feels very consistent, regardless of what stage I was in. And some of the things that I do, one, I don't let anyone write my speeches. Like it sounds crazy at my level. I'm like, no, I don't need a speechwriter. I'm writing my own speech. For even if I'm speaking, they can review it, of course, and I'll have legal go through any public speaking, but I keep the authenticity of my voice because I feel like I have a very unique positioning in the market, and that's how I need to show up. And so there's also consistency in my personal voice and my professional voice because I've owned it regardless of what organization that I'm at. And I've gotten comfortable with like that 17-year-old girl that was super unsure of herself and didn't know how to show up at work. Like I've grown into an authentic voice and an authentic version of myself. And so it feels very consistent because that's who I'm bringing, regardless of where I'm working or regardless of what the opportunity is. And so I think tapping into your authentic self and ensuring that you're bringing that forward in a very intentional way is really, really important. If you're working somewhere and you're feeling like you have to be somebody else, you probably should just go find a different job.
Yeah. Yeah. And then in looking at your body of work, I think that it is it is tempting for people to look and say like, oh my gosh, she has it all. Like she's gotten to do all this stuff and like everything's so easy for her. She goes from here to here. And we all know like that's not the truth, right? Like you have busted your behind. And there have been times, right, where it's like things get hard or whatever. So can you think back to a time in your career maybe where you felt stuck and like what did you do like tangibly to get unstuck?
Yeah, I mean, there's been a lot of seasons. People just get the headlines, but there's definitely been ebbs and flows, and that just comes. But I'm blessed, and I don't want to negate that. So I'm super thankful of all the experiences I've had. Yeah, I mean, there's been times where I've had challenging situations at work across the gamut, and probably experienced everything that everyone else is experiencing. I tell a story about when I was at Pepsi and I didn't make brand manager, and I had to go have a conversation with my boss about that. It's a very, very normal parts of a career trajectory. And I just worked through it. I just fought through it. I didn't give up. I think I'm very clear on my North Star and like, what is it that I'm here to do? The organization and the role is just a step in the journey of what I'm there to do. And so I have to continue to remind myself, like for me, I'm trying to evolve how people of color in the media are depicted. I want to be a CMO. Like I gotta keep thinking about that because all of the little things matter less and less if I'm working towards the bigger picture and reminding myself of what the bigger picture is and what I'm there to do. But absolutely, there's been a ton of challenges and I've had to continue to remind myself. My faith has also played a pivotal role because without that, like it's hard. It is hard in these streets, and people will test you. People will test you as a woman, especially as a woman of color and as a young woman of color. People will test you at all different points of your career, and you have to have that consistency and that faith of like reminding yourself of who God created you to be and what you're here to do.
And on that note, thank you so much, Lisette. This was awesome. If people wanted to connect with you, where would you recommend they do that best?
LinkedIn.
Okay. Perfect. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. This was amazing.
In today's hot seat, our employee question is, I live in the Chicagoland area and I am a marketer who has worked in the entertainment business for almost a decade. However, I'm very eager to expand my expertise in a new industry and transition this year into the world of beauty. Do you have any recommendations for me? Because I've had a very hard time making personal connections with those that are currently thriving and working in the industry, and I really want to make an impact and get my foot in the door. I've been searching like crazy for beauty marketing positions, but just haven't found the right fit or a company that will give me an opportunity. Any advice or guidance you would give would be greatly appreciated. One, kudos to you for pursuing your dream, right? Sometimes it's easy to get stuck and just stay in that career. So now that you've decided that beauty is where you belong, I say go for it. So the first thing that I would think about is what skills do you already have that are transferable? I believe you mentioned marketing. You want to get into beauty marketing, right? So what marketing projects have you done in your industry? And can you craft a story that helps a marketing manager within a beauty company or within a beauty agency bridge the gap between where you are right now and the job that they're trying to fill the position for, right? So where you are and the need that they have for whatever role it is that they're hiring for. Second, I would say now that, the internet is such a huge part of our lives, you don't have to limit yourself to beauty folks within your industry, right? There are tons of remote jobs. There are opportunities to network with people all across using tools like LinkedIn and Instagram and just social media as a whole. And also with that, social media allows you an opportunity to present your work to the world without having to go through the gatekeepers. And so I would say, one, look at how you are utilizing your social tools and your digital footprint. What are you actually sharing and putting out there? Two, expand your search beyond just where you are locally. And three, are you able to tell a story about where you've been professionally and how your skill set helps someone within the beauty industry solve whatever problem it is that they're trying to solve? But outside of that, just continue to network and make sure that you are in the spaces where you have the best opportunity to encounter people who can help you move to the next level. And our manager question for today in the hot seat: what things should I consider when trying to decide if I should take a chance on a potential hire? Such a good question. So I think that you can teach most hard skill sets. It's the soft skills, right, that make or break the kinds of contributions that someone adds to a team. I will say that you would look at your job description and actually be honest with yourself about what are the essential things or the essential skills that someone needs to have in order to excel at the position that you're hiring for. Once a candidate has met those things, cultural things you can teach. And when I say cultural, I mean cultural about like how your specific company does business, right? Those things you can teach. So you want to make sure the core competencies are there, the level of skill set that's required is there. And then the third part of that is, do they bring something to the organization that maybe does not currently exist, right? Is there a life experience that you don't have accounted for in your current talent pool that could be valuable to your organization? Is there some interesting, experiences that they've had that will provide a richness to the way that you do business and maybe force you all to think outside of how you are currently thinking? But I would say be really clear on what the essential skills are. Sometimes we think things are essential and they're not. They're just nice to have. And once those essential things are there, it's who do you think would add value to your organization because they bring a different perspective that you may not currently have. Okay, y'all, before we go, I am going to get us our affirmation to get us through the week. Of course, I'm using the I Choose the Ladder affirmation cards. If you don't already have your deck, head on over to choosetheladder.com and pick up your affirmation cards. And our thought for the weekend is, my career is a journey, not a destination. My career is a journey and not a destination. And with that, if you want to keep the conversation going, you can connect with me on Instagram at ICUWatching. And until next time, thank you for watching. Meeting adjourned.